In 1995, on a damp autumn night in Ohio, Emily Carter pressed her forehead against the cold bus window and tried to convince herself she was making the right decision. At 21, she was moving out of her parents' house for the first time, ready to finish a degree at a new university, away from the quiet suburb where nothing ever seemed to happen. She told herself this was a fresh start, a chance to finally live her own life. What she couldn't have known was that this decision would put her in the same apartment with a stranger who would change everything. If you're the kind of person who believes evil always looks obvious, wild eyes, a menacing grin, a shadow that chills you on sight, Emily's story will shake that belief to its core. Because when she first met her roommate, he seemed nothing like the monster he truly was. But before we dive into the full part of the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also follow for more interesting stories to come. When Emily Carter reached her destination, then the bus hissed and stopped near the row of old brick apartment buildings where she was set to live. The place looked weathered, with ivy crawling up the walls and windows that hadn't seen a good cleaning in years. She lugged her suitcase across the cracked sidewalk until she found a unit number, 4B. Her heart thumped as she turned the key the landlord had mailed to her. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and lemon cleaner. The living room was sparsely furnished, just a faded couch, a wobbly coffee table, and a lamp that leaned to one side. Emily dropped her bag and exhaled in relief. She had half expected the place to be unlivable, but this she could handle. She was unpacking dishes when she heard the door unlock. The man who stepped inside carried himself with the casual confidence of someone who had lived there longer. He was tall, lean, with dark hair neatly combed back and a polite smile that seemed almost rehearsed. "You must be Emily," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel Reeves, your new roommate." Emily smiled back, a little shy. "Hi, nice to meet you." Their handshake was firm, his palm warm. He wore a button-down shirt tucked into jeans, not sloppy like most guys she knew. He looked clean, put together, safe. Daniel helped her bring in the rest of her things, making small talk as they worked. He was 24, studying architecture, originally from Indiana. He spoke softly, with a kindness that set Emily at ease. He joked about the crooked cabinets and the eternally dripping faucet, but promised she'd get used to it. That first night, they ordered cheap pizza, shared a couple of sodas, and talked until nearly midnight. Emily couldn't believe her luck. Most people she knew dreaded roommates, but Daniel seemed respectful, easygoing, and even a little protective. But on the second week, she started to notice things. Daniel had a strict routine, out the door by 7 a.m., back by 6 p.m. He rarely talked about where he went, only muttering something about projects. Sometimes he came home later, his shirt untucked, a faint metallic smell clinging to him that made Emily wrinkle her nose. When she asked, he'd laugh it off. "Workshops get messy," he'd say. She wanted to believe him. She really did. One night, Emily woke to the sound of the front door opening at 2:13 a.m. She sat up, listening. The floorboards creaked as Daniel moved quietly across the living room. She thought maybe he was drunk, but when she peeked through her door, she saw him standing perfectly still in the dark, as if listening for something. His silhouette was rigid, hands hanging at his sides. After a minute, he went to his room and shut the door without a word. The next morning, he was cheerful again, asking if she wanted coffee. His easy smile erased her unease, at least for the moment. By October, Emily had fallen into a rhythm with him. They cooked dinner together sometimes, argued about TV shows, and even split groceries. He seemed like the kind of dependable guy anyone would want as a roommate. But then came the night she noticed a stain. She had gone to grab the laundry basket from the shared hallway closet when she spotted it, a reddish smear across the sleeve of one of Daniel's shirts. Not ketchup, not paint. Something darker, thicker. She froze, staring at it. When Daniel walked in behind her, she jumped. Everything okay?" His voice was calm, but his eyes flicked to the shirt and back again. Emily swallowed. "Yeah, just looking for my stuff." He reached past her, took the shirt, and stuffed it into a bag. "Workshop accident," he said smoothly, as though he had rehearsed it. "We use all kinds of dyes and sealants. Gets messy sometimes." She nodded, pretending to believe him, but something in her gut twisted uncomfortably. The real turning point came 3 weeks later. Emily had stayed late at the library, cramming for midterms. When she got back to the apartment around 11 p.m., she noticed Daniel's door was slightly ajar. She wouldn't have thought twice, except she heard something, a soft, muffled whimper. Curiosity pulled her closer. Through the narrow gap, she could see Daniel crouched over something on the floor. At first, she thought it was a mannequin, the way its limbs were stiff, lifeless. But then she caught a glimpse of pale skin, a hand limp against the hardwood. Her breath caught in her throat. Daniel turned suddenly, as though sensing her presence. His face was calm, eerily calm, but his eyes burned with a warning. He stood, closing the door slowly, deliberately, without saying a word. Emily staggered back into her room, heart hammering, palms sweating. She locked the door and pressed herself against it, trying not to make a sound. All night, she lay awake, listening. At some point, she heard the front door open and close. When she finally dared to check the next morning, Daniel's room was spotless, empty of anything unusual, almost too empty. She told herself she must have imagined it, that stress and lack of sleep were playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, she knew something was terribly wrong with her roommate. Still, she stayed. Where could she go? She had no money saved, no family nearby, no backup plan. She convinced herself she just needed to keep her head down, avoid confrontation, and wait until the semester ended. But the city had its own way of forcing truth into the open. In late November, the local news ran a report about a missing woman. Her photo flashed across the screen. Blonde, smiling, last seen leaving a coffee shop not far from campus. Emily's stomach dropped. The woman looked familiar. She had seen her once before, at their apartment. Her hands trembled as she excused herself to her room, pretending to be tired, pretending everything was normal. She shut the door, locked it quietly, and pressed her ear against the thin wood. She could hear the faint sound of Daniel sipping his coffee, the television droning on about the missing woman, and then silence. That silence weighed on her more than any noise could. She stayed awake until nearly dawn, convinced that at any moment he would come for her. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside sent her nerves on edge. When morning finally came, she stumbled into the bathroom, a reflection pale and hollow-eyed. Daniel was already gone, like he always was, leaving behind no clue of where he went. The apartment felt like a trap. Emily went to class, sat through lectures she couldn't absorb, and tried to appear normal. But her thoughts spun endlessly. What had she seen that night in his room? Whose hand had lain limp against the floor? And most of all, what would happen if he knew she had seen too much? That evening, when Daniel returned, he was as casual as ever. He asked how her classes were, whether she had eaten, if she wanted to split takeout. His voice was warm, easy, but Emily caught the way his eyes lingered on her, the way he seemed to study her reactions. She forced herself to smile, to laugh even, because something deep inside her screamed that if he suspected her fear, she would not survive the night. Days blurred together. Emily went through the motions of school, of normal life, but inside, her fear grew heavier. The missing woman's case stayed on the news. No suspects, no leads. Her bright smile plastered across posters downtown. Emily couldn't stop seeing her face, couldn't stop remembering how Daniel had smiled while watching the coverage. One night, unable to take it anymore, Emily called her mother from the payphone outside the library. She wanted to tell her everything, to beg her to come get her. but the words wouldn't form. Instead, she lied. "I'm fine, Mom. Classes are good. Yeah, my roommate's nice. Really nice." Her voice cracked on the last words, but her mother didn't seem to notice. She hung up quickly, afraid Daniel might somehow know she was talking about him. The pressure inside her built until it finally snapped one Friday evening. Emily came home earlier than usual and found Daniel sitting at the kitchen table. On the table lay a small notebook, open, filled with neat handwriting. He didn't notice her at first, and she read just enough to feel her stomach drop. List of names, dates, places. Some had lines through them. Some had notes beside them. Too loud. Perfect. Never again. Daniel looked up and caught her staring. "What are you doing?" His voice was calm. Too calm. Emily forced a nervous laugh. "Just got home. Sorry. Didn't mean to snoop." She stepped back, heart pounding, trying to appear casual. Daniel closed the notebook slowly, deliberately. His eyes lingered on Hayes, unreadable. Then he smiled, that same polite, practiced smile. "Everyone has secrets, right?" he said softly. Emily nodded, her throat dry, and hurried to her room. She locked the door and pressed her back against it, shaking so violently she thought her knees would give out. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was trapped. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat at her desk, scribbling a plan. She would leave. She had to. She could pack her things, pretend she was going home for Thanksgiving, and never come back. But then what? Daniel would know she had seen his notebook. He would follow her. He would find her. She thought about calling the police, but what could she say? That her roommate smelled like metal sometimes? That she saw a limp hand one night? That he kept a strange notebook? They would think she was paranoid. And if Daniel found out she had gone to the police without proof, the thought alone froze her blood. The breaking point came 2 nights later. Emily woke to the faint sound of humming. Not from the street, not from the television, from Daniel's room. The tune was low, steady, almost soothing. But beneath it she heard something else, a faint rustling, a muffled sob. She crept to her door, her hand hovering over the knob. Her instinct screamed at her not to open it, but she couldn't stop herself. The hall was dark. Daniel's door was shut, but light spilled faintly from the crack at the bottom. The sobbing was clearer now. Human. Desperate. Emily's breath caught. Her whole body screamed at her to run, but her legs locked in place. She toned, retreating back into her room as silently as she could. She shut the door, locked it, and this time dragged her dresser in front of it. Her chest heaved, tears streaming down her cheeks. Someone was in there, someone alive. By morning, the apartment was quiet again. When she dared peek into the living room, Daniel was there, sipping coffee, reading the newspaper. He looked up at her with that calm, unreadable smile. "You look tired," he said. "Bad dreams." Emily couldn't answer. Her throat felt sealed shut. She retreated to the bathroom, locked the door, and sobbed silently into a towel. For the next week, she lived in constant terror. Every sound in the apartment made her jump. Every time Daniel spoke to her, she searched his face for some crack, some sign of humanity, but found nothing. He was too calm, too composed, like a mask that never slipped. Then, one evening in December, the news changed everything. Another woman was missing. Same age, same area. Emily sat frozen on the couch, her knuckles white as the anchor spoke. She didn't need anyone to tell her. She knew Daniel had something to do with it. She knew the pattern. Daniel glanced at her, his smile curling faintly. "You watch too much TV," he said, almost teasing. That night, Emily decided she couldn't wait any longer. She didn't care if the police doubted her, didn't care if she had no proof. She would tell them everything. She wrote down the address, Daniel's name, everything she remembered about the night she saw the limp hand. She folded the paper and slipped it into her bag. Tomorrow, after class, she would go straight to the station. But Daniel must have sent something. He always seemed to know, because the next morning, when Emily went to leave, her bag was gone. She froze in the hallway, staring at the empty hook where it had hung. And then, slowly, she turned. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway, holding her bag by the strap. His smile was gone. "You looking for this?" he asked softly. Emily's throat closed up. The bag dangled from Daniel's hand. The folded paper she had hidden inside surely discovered. He stepped closer, his expression no longer polite, no longer friendly. There was something sharp in his eyes now, something that had been waiting, simmering beneath the surface all along. Her instinct screamed at her to lie. "Oh, thanks," she forced out, her voice trembling. "I must have dropped it." Daniel tilted his head, studying her. "Dropped it in my room." Emily froze. He knew, the way he said it, too deliberate, too certain, meant he had already looked inside. He knew she had written everything down. He knew she was planning to go to the police. Her pulse roared in her ears. I wasn't. "Emily." He cut her off, his voice calm but flat, stripped of warmth. "I think you've misunderstood me. Misunderstood everything." He set the bag down on the counter, but his eyes never left Hayes. It's dangerous to misunderstand people. Sometimes it gets them hurt. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to run. But where? The front door was 10 feet away, and Daniel stood between her and freedom. She forced herself to swallow. "I don't want any trouble," she whispered. He stepped closer, too close. His voice dropped to a chilling murmur. "You've seen things you shouldn't have. Heard things. Written things." He paused. "That makes you a problem. And I don't like problems." Emily's knees nearly buckled. She had seconds to act or be swallowed whole. Without thinking, she grabbed the first thing she could find on the counter, a ceramic mug, and hurled it at his face. It shattered against his shoulder, and she bolted for the door. Daniel lunged. His hand closed around her arm, yanking her back so hard she nearly fell. She screamed, twisting, kicking, clawing at his grip. He slammed her against the wall, his face inches from Hayes, his breath calm while hers came in frantic gasps. "You should have kept quiet," he whispered. Emily's eyes darted wildly, searching for anything, a weapon, a way out. Her fingers closed around the edge of the lamp beside the couch. With every ounce of strength, she swung it at his head. The metal base cracked against his temple, and Daniel staggered, releasing her. She didn't wait. She flung the door open and sprinted down the hall, barefoot, adrenaline carrying her faster than she'd ever run in her life. Behind her, she heard him recover, heard his footsteps pounding after her. She burst out into the freezing night air, her breath clouding. The street was nearly empty, just a single car idling at the far end. She screamed, waving frantically. "Help! Please!" The driver startled, then unlocked the doors. Emily dove inside just as Daniel appeared in the doorway of the building, his face twisted in fury. He didn't chase further. He only stood there, watching, his dark silhouette framed in the yellow glow of the hallway light. The driver, a middle-aged man with wide eyes, asked breathlessly, "What's going on?" "Police," Emily gasped. "Take me to the police." At the station, she spilled everything. The stains, the limp hand, the humming, the notebook, the missing women. The officers listened, skeptical at first, but her terror was undeniable. When she handed over the note she had written, still folded inside her bag, their expressions hardened. Within hours, they had a warrant. Emily sat in a stiff chair at the station, wrapped in a blanket, as the night bled into morning. She wanted to go home, to her parents, to anywhere but back to that apartment. Her whole body shook as she imagined Daniel still standing in that doorway, watching. By dawn, the news broke. Police had searched Daniel Reeves' apartment and discovered what Emily had feared all along, evidence of multiple women. Bloodstains hidden beneath the floorboards, jewelry stuffed into a showbox, and in his locked trunk, tucked neatly inside, the notebook she had glimpsed, now damning in its detail. But Daniel himself was gone. He had vanished into the night before they arrived, slipping out through the back while Emily fled through the front. By the time officers swarmed the neighborhood, he was nowhere to be found. For weeks, the city buzzed with fear. His face appeared on every news broadcast, every newspaper, every flyer. Wanted, Daniel Reeves. Armed and dangerous. Tips poured in. Sightings across Ohio, across Indiana, even further. But he always seemed one step ahead. Emily couldn't sleep, even after moving back in with her parents. Even after police assured her she was safe, she jumped at every sound. She saw his shadow in every passing stranger, felt his eyes on her whenever she walked alone. She had nightmares of waking in her room to find him standing over her, smiling that thin smile. Months later, in the spring of 1996, hikers in rural Pennsylvania stumbled upon a shallow grave. Inside lay one of the missing women, the same blonde who had once eaten dinner at Emily's table. The investigation confirmed what Emily already knew. Daniel was a predator, a killer who had moved carefully, methodically, until the night she stumbled into his secret. And yet, he was never caught. Years passed. Emily finished school, tried to rebuild her life, but the fear never fully left. She would change locks 3 times in a single year, avoid late-night buses, check every shadow before stepping into her apartment, because she knew Daniel was still out there, somewhere. Sometimes, late at night, she would remember that final look he gave her, the fury, yes, but also something else. A promise that one day he would come back.